Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our March installment of Supports Through the Lifespan, brought to you by the Delaware County Board of Developmental Disabilities. My name is Mallory, and I am the Community Relations Specialist at DCBDD. And Supports Through the Lifespan is a monthly webinar series in which we tackle different areas of need for different areas of the lifespan. Today we are talking with Elizabeth from OCALI, and she is, Brittany is gone. And she is going to be talking to us about transitions at various stages of young adulthood. So, Elizabeth, I'm going to pass it off to you. I will be monitoring the chat for questions. But other than that, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much for having me today. Like Mallory said, my name is Elizabeth Wheatmartian, and I am the co-manager of the Lifespan Transition Center at OCALI. Today, I'm going to be talking about tools and to support successful transitions. So really looking at this idea from planning to practice. So how do we move that planning into the actual doing part? And some tools and resources to help you along the way. So in case you're not familiar with OCALI, I do want to give you a couple slides about OCALI and who we are. Our vision is why we do what we do. People with disabilities have the opportunity to live their best lives for their full lives. And we really try to think about that in all the tools and resources that we do and create for our website and our partners. We inspire change and promote access to opportunities for people with disabilities. So we're constantly thinking about accessibility and how is this really going to help change the next generation of people. And then we are informed by public policy and develop and deploy practices grounded in linking research to real life. So we really want this to be practical, and we want this to be tied to those research-based practices and effective practices. So a little bit about the LTC, that's the Lifespan Transition Center. You're going to hear me refer to it as the LTC. We offer resources, training, and technical assistance and consultation around the state of Ohio and nationally to support successful transitions of people with autism and multiple disabilities throughout their school careers and into those young adult lives. Our resources really do address community living and employment while also offering that support during the school age years. And not just in high school. We like to think about transition from birth to death. So we are moving into this younger space, and you'll hear about that later today. And a little bit about our language. A lot of times people have noticed that we're using person first language, which emphasizes the identity or disability after we identify the person. Now, we also know that identity first language puts the identity or disability first in the description. We're going to use those interchangeably throughout this presentation. We also know that it is a personal preference, but I do want to put that disclaimer out that I do use it interchangeably. But if there is a personal preference that you would like me to stick with, happy to do that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is person-centered planning, and what exactly is it? So when we're thinking about person-centered planning, we want to make sure that we're putting the student at the center of all planning discussions. This makes sure that their input is shaping what their goals are for education, employment, and independent living. That voice is clear throughout everything that we're doing. The reason we want this is because students should have buy-in to what we're planning for. If they do not agree with it or do not feel the need to plan for that space, they're not going to want to put the work in, just like we don't want to put the work in if our voices and our goals are not at the center of it. Family, educators, and service providers are going to act as those partners to support the student's vision and not impose their own vision into it. It's not to say that we don't want their input. We definitely do. But if, again, we're not putting the student first and at the center of the conversation, then we've lost that buy-in from them. We also want to know that the plan is individualized. This is not a one-size-fits-all model. Person-centered planning is really individualized to the person we are planning for. Now, we can take those experiences and lessons learned from other students that we've worked with, but again, this should be individualized to that student. And then we need to provide action steps and that are meaningful and practical. So designing to help the student move towards that adult life, whether that's through school, work, community participation, or just basic daily living. So what is backwards planning? The definition of backwards planning starts with the end in mind. So we're thinking about that end goal, the youth's adult life outcomes, and work backwards to identify the steps, supports, and agencies needed. And why backwards planning matters is because we're keeping a focus on meaningful outcomes. It's going to help us prevent those gaps in the planning. So we're making sure that we're making those incremental steps so that the student is building upon each step. And it aligns with the school, the families, and the agencies that are then going to be supporting that student on their journey. We're not going to be duplicating services or overlapping services or activities. We're really going to be building upon them. So when we're talking about backwards planning in the process for transition, there's really 5 questions that we kind of come to surface every time we're doing this. What do we know about the youth's desired adult outcomes? What do we know about the youth themselves? What else do we need to know in order to plan? So what questions do we have that will help us make a better and more aligned plan? How are we going to find the answers to those questions that have surfaced? And what steps do we need to take to move the youth from where they are to where they want to be? That's that a desired adult life outcome. So the reason I'm talking about all of this is that we have a tool for that. This is where we bring in the backwards planning template. This helps map out goals, the agencies that are going to support those goals, and the next steps. If you are familiar with OCALI and the Ohio Employment First Backwards Planning template, you will notice that it does not look the same as the previous version. So we did update this about 3 or 4 months ago. So this might look a little different. And the reason we updated it is that we know backwards planning is not just for youth. Today, we're talking about it in a youth standpoint because that's the age demographic that we're working with right now. But backwards planning is a tool that can be utilized from birth until death and really can be evolving and changing as the person that we're planning for evolves and changes. So, this is one really great tool and resource that we want you to bookmark. And so, how do we actually use it? So, that's great. We talked about what it is and why it's important, but how do we do this? We begin with identifying those outcomes. What are the adult life goals? What is wanted and what is not wanted? Oftentimes, it's hard for us to identify a goal. So, by asking those questions, what do I want versus what do I not want, can help us narrow down what we're trying to plan for. We all know that our experiences and what we want is limited to what we have directly experienced or the world that we are living in currently or the community that we're engaged with, right? So oftentimes answering what we don't want will help us identify what we do want. So a lot of times students will say, well, I don't want to live alone, or I do want to live alone, right? So we're kind of identifying what those opposites are. So we start with what you know. Then when we're moving into step 2, we're going to put that current information about the youth. This is where those pins come in. What are my preferences, my interests, my needs, and my skills and strengths? So we can do this by interviewing them, filling out questionnaires, doing assessments. But I also love that in our tool, we have this nice little page that helps ask questions, kind of helping you understand and look at what are those pins and how do we start moving forward with that? And we give you some options to get started. Of course, you don't need to use this, take what you leave and or take what you want and leave what you don't. But this is a really great way to start helping organize that data in a really meaningful way. So that leads us to question 3. What else do we need to know? What I love about question 3 is that it directly corresponds to question 4, which is going to be How will we find the answers? We also, what I love about this too is that when there are more questions, questions mean opportunity. If that person that we're planning for is evolving and changing and the experiences that we're giving them change and shift the direction of the goal, that's great. That means we're evolving as a that student is evolving as a person, and it's leading to more opportunities and more exposure to things. So we want to make sure that we're determining additional information needed to develop that plan. We need to know about the youth, about the goals, and about the services and supports, not that are just available, but actually what services and supports they qualify for. Because we never want to plan a goal around something that we don't know a youth is qualified for. So if you know that something requires waiver funding or a special intake, we want to make sure that they have that before we write it in the plan. And then we identify the methods to gather that necessary information. And then we can use those mini methods that are both formal and informal to start answering some of those questions that arise. So this is what the backwards plan actually looks like in our template. It is all editable, so you can either type right in it or print it off and write it. So for all those people that love paper, you can just download and print. But this is going to help us think about what are all those steps, and it's going to help us identify the gap in that plan. So at the top, we're going to write the adult life goal. On the far right side, we're going to put those future skills and the connections to achieve the goals. On the far left side, we're going to put the current skills and connections related to the goals. So at the end, where do we want to end up? And at the beginning, where are we currently at? And then everything in the middle is considered the gap. And that is where we're going to fill in those steps, those incremental steps to get us to where we want to go. So in this space, you can put assessments, you can put the services that the youth qualify for, the experiences that we want them to have, the instruction that's going to happen, and those milestones that we want the youth to hit in order to close that gap, to get them from where they're at to where they're going. So you want to think of it as these steps. So we have that baseline, those current skills, current connections, maybe those questions that we have at the very beginning. And then we're going to begin building out those needed skills, reaching out to create important connections and exploring the answers to those questions that will then lead us to the adult life goal. What are those needed skills, the helpful connections and understanding that we want to have at the end of our plan? So this is just a really quick example of a backwards plan. Our start is we're unsure of the goal. We always want to start with the goal. The goal is we want to move into their own apartment with financial resources, skills, and the support and transportation. Where we're at is we're unsure of the apartment cost, we're unsure of the transportation, and we're unsure of if the skills are sufficient. It is okay when you're backwards planning or moving towards a goal if you don't have any baseline knowledge about what your goal is. That is okay. That's where we're going to start identifying those steps to gain that baseline knowledge to get you closer to that end goal. So we're going to research budget requirements for a variety of apartments. We're going to identify the needed daily living skills. We're going to identify transportation options and opportunities that are available. Then that next step is we're going to explore additional means of increasing income to meet the budget, and we're going to develop that plan to expand targeted skills. And then the next step is we're going to select the apartment based on the income and the transportation that we just learned about and narrowed down. We're going to determine needs and extent of daily assistance required so that we can start filling in those service gaps. So the next tool I want to talk about is the agency navigation tool. Now that we've identified all these steps and processes, we understand the goal that we're trying to reach, we know where our baseline is, it's really important to understand the agencies that can help support our youth to those goals. This tool that can be found on the Ohio Employment Burst website is going to help you identify which agencies provide what services and then exactly when you should connect to those services. So it's going to help you quickly identify what agencies exist in Ohio that support transition-aged youth. It's going to give you some of the services that they provide to transition-aged youth, who's eligible for that service, and then really when to connect with them. So I like this because although it's not going to give you every service and possibility that's under the sun for that agency, it's going to give you those brief highlights, and especially those highlights pertaining to transition age youth, meaning that 14 to 22 age range specifically. So inside the agency navigation tool, so when you're flipping through it, you're going to know that everything is organized by agency categories. It's going to outline and summarize those services that they provide. So thinking high level, it's going to give you an option to take notes on eligibility and how to connect with those services. And it's going to help organize the information and documentation that is needed to do those intakes, or maybe where you're at and who you're already connected to. So something that I love and hate about Ohio is that all of our agencies have the O's and the D's and the E's in them. And so a lot of times family members are getting confused on who OOD is, or who DODD is, or ODW is. So they start jumbling them up. I have been in several meetings where parents are like, oh, we're already connected to ODD. As a professional, I know that there is no ODD. So what service are we talking about? Are we talking about opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities? Are we talking about the county board? Are we talking about Ohio Department of Education and Workforce? So this is a way that we can help organize that in a nice graphic organizer. So why does the agency navigation tool matters? This matters because it is to use as a resource during person-centered planning meetings. So you can use this during your IEP meetings, your ISP meetings, your IPE meetings. Again, you'll see all the O's, the E's, and the P's. Oh, is there a question? No? Okay.
No, I
Um,
don't think so.
Okay, great. Thanks. And it's going to help families and professionals understand the available agencies and what services they could potentially provide to the students. Again, it's really important that you check once you have been found eligible for supports and services, what then does that look like for your individual student or youth that you're working with, or your child? Because again, not all individuals qualify for the same things through different support agencies. Some are waiver based, some are needs based, some are if you've experienced that experience or not, or where you're at in the planning process. So we want to make sure that we're bringing all those people to the table. And also, this agency navigation tool will help promote collaboration across systems. So when you're identifying what that gap is and putting in those stepping stones to get to that end goal, you can understand how these services and supports really work together, and can be built upon one another, instead of just because a student qualifies means they should do all these things. And then there's a lot of overlap in service delivery. And ultimately, the student is the one that doesn't benefit from this, because in my opinion and in my experience, that student is getting bored when they're constantly doing the same transition assessment for 3 different entities. So this is really going to help with negating that problem and making sure that we're building upon services and not just duplicating services. So another resource that I want to talk about, and this might not pertain to everybody who's listening today, but I wanted to make sure I put it in here, is our What Works for Work learning series. This is free online professional development that anybody can take. It is behind a login, but what I like about this is it's going to break down evidence-based practices and supporting youth at home, in school, and in the community. And we really did design this with transition aged youth and adults in mind. And how can we use these tools and resources in multiple settings with our older population? So a lot of times when we think about this, these evidence-based practices, one that is typically used a lot is visual supports. So thinking visual schedules, thinking about those natural visual supports, maybe at like an airport when it tells you what concourses where and what food items are available in each of those concourses. Those are natural supports. They're visuals that are naturally occurring for anybody to look at. But we don't look at these visual supports from an older standpoint. A lot of times when you're thinking about visual supports, we connect them with littles. And although they are very effective for young students, or I like to call them littles, they are just as effective for us big kids and adults out there. So I don't know anybody who doesn't use their cell phone as a visual support, whether they're looking at their calendar, they're using it as reminders to take their medication, or when a package is going to be delivered. Those are all visual supports. So this learning series really looks at evidence-based practices from an older youth or adult perspective and shows you how this looks like at the job and in the community and at home. So again, these are free. Anybody can sign up to take them. If you are a professional, you will receive a CEU, a certificate at the end of each module. They are fast paced. They're about 30 minutes worth of time, or 30 minutes of your time, and packed with a lot of content and downloadable resources.
I love these, and
Yeah.
I have my LSW, and so I've used a few of them for my license renewal, which I felt like was kind of cheating because somewhat familiar with the topic already.
Yeah.
But if I ever have folks reach out to me about like, we have a new autistic employee, or how do I navigate the situation, like I recommend your guys's trainings to them because they are very, very well put together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And then also, just if you're thinking of ideas, if we pooled a lot of job coaches and paraprofessionals in particular when we were developing these to figure out what is that missing piece. And we realized that onboarding is very problematic for a lot of providers because there's such a shortage and we need to get these people out in the field right away, but we oftentimes don't provide them with that foundational level of support. That's where we decided that these could really fit a need. So if you are looking for CESP credits, we just got approved by APSI, and these count towards CESP credits as well. So, or CEUs. So really great resource. Anybody can use them. I highly recommend it. And if you're looking to create a good onboarding process, would be something that I think you should include in your onboarding. So the next set of resources I want to talk about today is our PREETS resources. So for those that don't know, PREETS stands for Pre-Employment Transition Services. We partnered with Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities to create a curriculum, a ready-use curriculum for anybody to download and utilize. Although we did think of providers who are already providing PREETS services or providers who are thinking about providing PREETS services, this is who we created this for. However, as a former special ed teacher and a former transition teacher, and transition coordinator, I would have used these in my own classroom with a full class of students. So these can be used in one-on-one scenarios, small group settings, or classroom settings. What I love about these is that they are broken down by PREETS category. So we have lessons and activities associated with all the federally mandated PREETS categories. So job exploration counseling, work-based learning, workplace readiness training, instruction in self-advocacy, and counsel on post-secondary opportunities. Once you click on one that you want to explore, we break it down by the benchmark or the requirement that is listed for OOD. So although anybody can use these, this is going to be really user-friendly for providers providing OOD services. So once you click on the category that you want to explore, it's going to then pull you to a page that looks very similar to this and then show you what benchmarks. So every activity within this section will help you reach that benchmark outlined by OOD. So why employment matters is the overarching theme of the activities. And then the benchmark that all these activities are going to meet is how to explore why employment matters to the student. So we broke these down. Everything is clickable. So once you click into begin lesson, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. And these are all the different activities to meet the benchmark. There's going to always be more than one activity within each benchmark or requirement. So you can start where the student that you're working with or the group of students that you're working with are at. They kind of go from least complex to most complex in activities. So for this one, we're in why employment matters, and we're looking at discovering your why. Then work and its benefits. It's more than just a job. Work in action, how jobs shape our community. And then activity 4 is the value of work. And then we have this extended pathways, why employment matters to me. And those extended pathways were really designed to help meet those learners who are at a more advanced level. So maybe students enrolled in career tech or already enrolled in university or community college. However, we didn't want anybody to be deterred from looking at this for students that are still in high school or maybe our younger students or students with more complex needs. Again, all of these can be differentiated to meet the need of your student, but that's kind of how we thought this out. In general. And then once you click on each of those activities, it's going to provide you with worksheets, PowerPoints, and all sorts of materials, videos. It even has a working script in it. So you can print these out as sub-plans if you're a teacher, because everything is right there. You can also download everything as a PDF for the whole unit, if that's something that you like. I know when I was teaching pre-ets, I had a binder and I would keep track of everything that my students were doing just in case I went to a place that the internet was out or I was having bad connection or whatever. I never lost a beat and I could pick up where I left off. I also would like to make notes on where each student was at in the different lessons that I was providing. So I called it my Go binder and I still have it somewhere in my closet. So
I'm
this is a
also a pen
really
and paper person, so I appreciate that.
yeah, of course. I'm a paper girly when it comes to school stuff. I still have all of my old school lessons. So
I mean, that's
this is
how we like became future teachers, right? It was like
correct.
playing school and having all the worksheets and exactly. It's like our origin story.
Correct. It is the origin story. You are so correct. So again, these are grab and go resources. They are intended to be able to be used right away. But as I approach most things in life, take what you need, leave what you don't, and feel free to adapt when needed. So we are not saying you have to follow the script. We're not saying you have to start with 1 and end with 4. It's really start wherever you want to, add any supplemental materials that you think would work with your student, or maybe this is just a vocab list that is going to be really beneficial, and I only want to use the vocabulary list from all these activities. Everything's free. You can manipulate it once you download it. So really great resource, and one that I feel like everyone should know about. And this is on the Ohio Employment First website, as is most of the resources that we talked about today. So this leads us into our next, and I apologize, I'm kind of talking like an auctioneer because I want to get through everything, but this is our next resource, which is the Olaf and the Elsa. If you see what I did there, I can't say anything because I don't own the rights to a very large company with mouse ears, but this is our Olaf and Elsa. So the Elsa is the Employability Life Skills Assessment. And this is really designed for students that are at that transition age. So they're already at 14. But what we were noticing is that a lot of people and students didn't get those foundational skills at a younger age. So they were scoring really low on the ELSA. And we were trying to identify how can we promote better scores for ELSA if we introduce these concepts at an earlier age and like what does that actually look like? So that then brings us to our OLAF, which is the OCALI Life Skills for Adulthood framework. These are going to be skills, essential skills that will promote lifelong success that directly correlate to everything that is on the ELSA. This OLAF is intended to be used for grades K-5. However, after we developed it, we did realize that there is benefit to expanding that beyond that K-5 range. So if your student is older than fifth grade, but these skills are still applicable to them, don't let that deter you from using it or utilizing it. We also know that some skills are not going to be applicable for those older level students because we do talk about puberty and everything in the OLAF. So again, take what you need, leave what you don't, but definitely take a look at it. So this is how the OLAF is broken down. We're going to give you a quick introduction of what it is, how to use it, so why we did what we did and how to use it, and then providing you with those universal teaching strategies. These are things that can be used across all of these different domains and the OLAF, and things that you can just implement on the fly at home or at school or in the community. And then we have everything broken down. So the categories will pretty much mirror what is in the ELSA, with the exception of language and literacy. That's not in the ELSA, but something we thought was really going to be beneficial for our littles and the individuals that we intended this document originally to be used for. So we're going to have categories in self-care, general habits of work and daily life, relationships with peers and adults, safety, making choices, self-help and self-advocacy, communication and relationships, and then that language and literacy. We also offer a summary page and then an example of how that summary page should be filled out. So we really try to move through this document pretty fluidly, and you can pick up wherever you left off or jump around. So everything in the PDF is totally clickable and it will take you to that page, but you can also print it off and there's spots for notes, which you'll see in a little bit. So I'm just going to move through what this looks like. So for this, everything's color coded. So when we're moving into general habits of work and daily life, you're going to see a darker bolded band at the top. That's what we're referring to as the domain. So the domain is really going to be that overarching skill that we are really trying to focus on over the next couple of pages. Then we have those subdomains. So we have this overarching skill, and then we have these smaller subdomains within that overarching skill that's going to be a little bit more targeted. And then we have those sub skills, which are those targeted, tangible skills that we want individuals to work on to meet that subdomain. Now, nothing is done linear, and we did not do anything associated to an age or grade. And the reason we did that is because we know learning is fluid and that some students possess skills, some more advanced skills without really understanding those foundational skills. So we didn't want people to feel like if their student is in fourth grade, they should have all of these things mastered by now, because learning comes with regression and it comes with acceleration. And so sometimes we might know something and then a couple of years later we have some regression and we need to revisit that. That's just how we operate. So we didn't want to tie any ages or stages to anything, but really offer some fluid ideas of what to be working on. At the end of each set of sub skills, you're going to notice a priority ranking scale. Is this a low priority, a medium priority, or a high priority for the youth that we're talking about right now? We did put these under each of the subdomains and sub-skills because we know that not all students are going to be working on navigating with familiar buildings such as school, work sites, and community destinations like the grocery store, library, hospital, but they might be working on following school and employer agency procedures when late or absent. So again, you do not need to do everything all at once because we know this document is long and lengthy, but really to kind of categorize and pinpoint what we want to be working on. After you go through each of the sub skills, we have everyday teaching and support strategies that will help you support the sub skills and the development of the youth. So these are just different strategies that you can use that really prioritize or put into focus what that whole domain is about. And so you'll again, sorry, I kind of forget what my slides are because I've talked about these so many times. But at the top, you'll notice that it is color coded. It's going to have that domain, and it's going to have the overall priority level. So if you're thinking this is a really high priority for students or a low priority, just a way to categorize it. Those everyday teaching and support strategies, like I talked about, which will support all those sub skills and development of the domain. And then we also have a nice little spot for team notes. So this is completely editable if you download as a PDF, or again, if you're a paper pencil person, you can print this off and take notes on it. So that is how all of our domains are categorized. So as you move through that, we kind of rough or briefly touch base on this, but who can use the OLAF? And the nice simple answer is everyone can use the OLAF, although we did design it with K-5 in mind. So these are just some examples of what that looks like. So just another example. So you'll notice that everything's color coded. And then at the very end, we give you that summary of priority skills and what this might look like if you wanted to develop a plan of support around it. So you can categorize what you're working on in a snapshot, and then who is going to be doing what and where and how it's going to be handled. So in this example, not only do we have family and caregivers in there, we have teachers, we have support staff, and we even have a coach labeled in here. So we don't want this to be a very clinical thing. We really want this to be a family plan, something that parents can use during IEP meetings or just at home with their own youth and the people that are supporting them as they're raising their child, because as we all know, it does take a village to raise any child, but it takes an even bigger village to help with those with special needs, because there are just so many moving parts and services and support agencies. So just another tool to have in your toolbox. I did have some questions that you guys can ponder on. So implementation, we definitely want all these tools and resources to be used. So as you're thinking about this in your own time, how do you see yourself using these tools and resources with the youth that you support, whether it's your own child or if it is a student? How could you use these tools and resources to spark ideas and enrich planning, team conversations? How could you use these tools and resources to fit into your existing approaches and practices that you currently have? And do you foresee any challenges or barriers to use any of these tools and resources? We really want you to be thinking about, how do these work together in tandem? How can you use them separate? What is the use case for different things? Because as much as I love talking about the tools and resources, what I love even more is talking about how they apply to you as an individual and the students and adults that you're supporting. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at ltc@ocali.org. We're happy to come out, do presentations, do some planning with you, or help you understand how these resources and tools can be utilized and linked together. And if you're using something and you're like, whoa, this is not hitting the mark, we want to know that too, because we're always trying to improve. Just like we got some feedback about our backwards planning tool, and that's why we adjusted it to be really focused on anybody to use it. So we love all feedback. Feedback is a gift that we should accept. So please feel free to contact us with any questions or support that you may need. I do hope that you found today beneficial. And if there's anything else that OCALI can do or you have questions, again, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love your presentation. It reminds me a lot. I worked in transition before this role. And so I remember like so many teams came in just feeling very lost and feeling like overwhelmed with the amount of resources and where to go and how to navigate this journey that was new
Yeah.
to a lot of the team. So I appreciate the wonderful tools that you guys have put together and how accessible and they are as well. So again, did you have your contact information on the
We
slide
use,
or?
yeah, we use LTC at ocali.org. That goes
Okay.
to everybody on our team, and then we field questions that way based on where people are at in the state.
Okay, perfect. So if anyone has any questions, if you're viewing this on the YouTube channel after the fact, LTC, Lawrence Train Pat at ocali.org is, I know that's not the correct code or whatever, but LTC at ocali.org to get in touch with any questions. So again, I want to thank Elizabeth very much for your time and for being here today to share your expertise. And stay tuned for our April session of Support for the Lifespan. Stay tuned for more information on that. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.